is in danger too. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivara Dhari. Let's give it to Dimitri. Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivara Dhari. Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari 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 Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajakacharya Ashtotara Shata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajakacharya Ashtotara Shata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantagoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sekaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivas Adi Ghaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakund Radha Kund Giri Govardhana Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Navadvip Dham ki jai, Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai, Ganga Mai ki jai, Yamuna Mai ki jai, Tulasi Devi ki jai, Bhakti Devi ki jai, Samaveta Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vishnaya Bhutale Bhakti Vikasa Swami. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, so we are reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 13, text number 14. Tams, Tan, Vipannan, Sahi, Tatra, Tatra, Vihaya, Jatam, Parigriya, Sarthat, Avartate, Dhyapi, Nakaschid, Atra, Viradvana, Param, Upaiti, Yogam, Tamstan Dipannan Sahitatra Tatra, Vihaya Jatam Parigrihya Sartha, Avartate Dhyapina Kaschidatra, Viradhana Paramupaiti Yogam, Tamstan Vipannan Sahitatra Tatra, Vihaya Jatam Parigrihya Sartha, Avartate Dhyapina Kaschidatra, Viradvana Paramupaiti Yogam, Tamstan Vipannan Sahitatra Tatra, Vihaya Jatam Parigrihya Sartaha, Avartate Dhyapina Kaschidatra, Viradhana Paramupaiti Yogam, Tamstan Vipannan Sahitatra Tatra, Vihaya Jatam Parigrihya Sartha, Avartate Dhyapina Kaschidatra, Viradhana Paramupaiti Yogam, Daddy, you want to try? Anybody on Zoom?
Tastan vipannan sahitatra tatra
Tamstan vipannan sahitatra tatra
vihaya jatam pariguya sarthaha
vihaya jatam parigrahya sarthaha
avartate dhyapina kaschidatra
avartate dhyapina kasyadatra
viradvana paramupeti yogam
viradhana paramupaiti yogam. Tan, all of them. Vipannan, embarrassed in various ways. Saha, the living being. He, certainly. Tatra, here and there. Vihaya, giving up. Jatam, those who are newly born. Parigrahya, taking. Excuse me. Sa'artaha, the living being searching for his own interest. Avartate, wanders in this forest. Adya api, even until now. Na, not. Kashit, any of them. Atra, here in this forest. Veera, O hero. Adhanaha, of the path of material life. Param, the ultimate end. Upaiti, gets. Yogam, the process of devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. My dear King, on the forest path of material life, first a person is bereft of his father and mother, and after their death he becomes attached to his newly born children. In this way he wanders on the path of material progress and is eventually embarrassed. Just as a side note, Derivative Prabhu often mentions this, but for those who might not be familiar with Prabhupada's use of English, he uses the word embarrassed not to mean like embarrassed, like you're ashamed, but to mean that you're being harassed or you're being what's a troubled, harassed. Yeah. Nonetheless, no one knows how to get out of this, even up to the moment of death. Purport. In this material world, family life is an institution of sex. Yanmaitunadi grahmedi sukham. Through sex, the father and mother beget children, and the children get married and go down the same path of sexual life. After the death of the father and mother, the children get married and beget their own children. Thus, generation after generation, these things go on in the same way without anyone's attaining liberation from the embarrassment of material life. No one accepts the spiritual processes of knowledge and renunciation, which end in bhakti yoga. Actually, human life is meant for jnana and vairagya, knowledge and renunciation. Through these, one can attain the platform of devotional service. Unfortunately, people in this age avoid the association of liberated people, sadhu sangha, and continue in their stereotyped way of family life. Thus, they are embarrassed by the exchange of money and sex. And I'll read the next one as well, just by myself. Manasvino nirjita diggajendra mameti sarve bhuvi baddha vaira mrideshairan natu tadvrajanti yanyasta dando gata vairobhiyati. There were and are many political and social heroes who have conquered enemies of equal power, yet due to their ignorance in believing that the land is theirs, they fight one another and lay down their lives in battle. They are not able to take up the spiritual path accepted by those in the renounced order. Although they are big heroes and political leaders, they cannot take to the path of spiritual realization. Purport. Big political leaders might be able to conquer equally powerful political enemies, but unfortunately they cannot subdue their strong senses, the enemies that always accompany them. Not being able to conquer these nearby enemies, they simply try to conquer other enemies, and ultimately they die in the struggle for existence. They do not take to the path of spiritual realization or become sannyasis. Sometimes these big leaders take up the guise of a sannyasi and call themselves Mahatmas, but their only business is conquering their political enemies. Because they spoil their lives with the illusion of this is my land and my family, they cannot progress spiritually and attain liberation from the clutches of Maya. Om Ajnanatirmirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupakadamahyam Dadati Svavadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutav Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitangsha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So in this material world and basically everywhere, there's this idea that people have role models. And even in Vedic culture, it's an integral part of one's development, just growing up, that you need role models. That's just how things are. You need somebody to guide you. You need, you have your mother, you have your father, you have the spiritual master in Vedic culture. And so it's integral that people have role models, have somebody to look up to. But in Kali Yuga nowadays, especially in Western society, and also in India, people are just looking up to completely useless people, like just completely useless people. Like they look up to sports stars and movie stars, and some people look up to politicians, but that's kind of weird. People don't really look up to politicians, but some people do. I know some people. And rich people who have a lot of money, people who have engaged in transactions of money and sex sufficiently, they look up to those people in general. But like I mentioned, these people are actually just completely useless people. They have no real impact on the world. They have no real impact on people's lives, besides just being somebody that people may like to look at or may like to hear, speak or something like that. And there are still, vestiges of some kind of, sattvic culture where people, they respect elders. People, they respect their parents. Parents are meant to be role models. They respect their elders. But nowadays being an elder doesn't mean very much. Because the idea is that you're supposed to have real knowledge. But parents in Kali Yuga, practically the way that they educate their children, every parent wants this. They want their children to be successful. They want their children to have a successful life. They want them to have a life better than them, actually. Because being a parent, it's kind of a selfless role. So they want their children to be successful. But in material society, in this material world, people, what is their success? Their success is sense gratification. Their success is just do anything to make yourself feel good, which is sort of a cheap way to live your life. But, so yeah. And it's mentioning in this first verse that I read, text 14, after the death of the father and mother, the children get married and beget their own children. Thus, generation after generation, these things go on in the same way, without anyone's attaining liberation from the embarrassment of material life. So Prabhupada's mentioning here that these things, they go on in the same way, but it's also actually implied that things get worse. The nature of things is that they degrade over time. Some people like to think that things just get better over time, and so people are pushing for all kinds of, making progress in society and making advancement. But actually things over time, and this is observable, things, they degrade. Nothing really gets all that much better. And so there's this saying, it's kind of a funny saying, that if the guru passes water standing up, then the disciple will pass water while walking. So the tendency is that what somebody is, some instruction or some way, some like purpose that people are given, they take it and they run with it. So parents nowadays are encouraging their children to be successful in sense gratification, to gratify their senses and just to be happy, eat, drink, and be merry. And generation after generation, things are just getting more and more degraded, because they're just people, generation after generation, they're just taking that instruction of pursue sense gratification, and they're just running with it. And any way that they can find it, they'll find it. They'll try their best. And so all of these like walls are breaking down. People are realizing different ways that they're hampered in their sense gratification, whether it's morals, whether it's social codes, or whether it's positions or things like that. And so things are just getting worse and worse. Like for example, back in the day, 1950s and 60s, the older generation thought that Elvis Presley was satanic. They thought that his music and his whole mood, they thought it was satanic. But nowadays in music, you can make actual explicit references to Satan, whole songs that are actually about Satan, and everyone thinks it's very nice. Everyone thinks it's just, it's just normal. So things, they just get worse and worse and worse and worse. And there's no sign of it stopping. It's only actually going to get worse. And that's what our Shastra says, that it's just going to get worse and worse and worse until people are just completely out of their minds. Actually, they're already completely out of their minds. And this is the nature of Maya. This is kind of what happens, is you dip your toes in, and she just grabs you and pulls you in. Like there's the Odyssey, this Greek epic poem, classic epic poem, where there's a part of it where the main character, Odysseus, it's about like this big journey that mainly stars Odysseus. And so they're sailing through this area by these islands where there are these mermaids, the sirens, and they have such a beautiful song that it's completely bewildering, to anyone who hears it. And so what happens is that the ships, these men, they hear this beautiful siren song, and they go over to these islands, and the sirens just pull them in and kill them. Yeah. I think so. Maybe, I don't know. I don't remember. I haven't read the Odyssey since freshman year, or maybe sophomore year of high school. So it's just from memory. But yeah. So but the main character, Odysseus, he really wanted to hear this siren song. So he instructed his crewmen, just tie me to the mast, because they all put wax over their ears so that they couldn't hear. But he instructed his crew members, I'd like to hear it, just to hear it. And so he said, tie me to the mast, don't put wax in my ears, I want to see how it is. And so, but as soon as he heard it, he just started, he was going nuts. He was like, untie me right now, this instant, I want to go there. Like that. So this is the nature of Maya. It just bewilders one. If you just dip your toes in a little bit, whether it's a thought, whether it's one word, whatever it is, if you just dip your toes in the ocean of Maya, she'll pull you right in. You'll never come out. And you can just see that with how people live their lives nowadays. They don't even think, like Prabhupada was mentioning in this purport, they never take to the spiritual path of self-realization and become sannyasis. They're struggling so much in material life. These people they're suffering like anything. but they think that they're very, very happy. And actually, they take it as a personal offense. When one gives up sense gratification for some higher purpose, they take it as a personal offense. So people are just completely insane, actually. They're completely insane. And even they've actually dovetailed, it's funny because Prabhupada uses, but they've dovetailed this renunciation, this jnana and vairagya, into their sense gratificatory endeavors. Like there's this whole movement nowadays, people, living very simply. I think it's kind of started with Steve Jobs, I think. But, he lived very simply. He wore, the same thing every day for, 20 years or something like that. And he had a nice house, but he didn't have much inside of it. Drove a simple car. You wake up very early in the morning. People nowadays, I saw one video. This was a long time ago, but I remember seeing it, that people that are waking up, they're saying the benefits of waking up at 4 a.m. so that you can get all your work done, so you can get more work done, So these people, you could say they're dovetailing this jnana and vairagya in the service of their senses. It's really amazing, actually. And so these people, they become like gurus, for people who are interested only in material sense gratification. They're seen as like really spiritual people. And it's kind of like the same thing with Gandhi. I think this was Prabhupada who said this, but Gandhi, he said, amongst politicians, Gandhi was a saint. But among saints, Gandhi was a politician. So it's the same thing, People, they do a little bit, they have like a little kind of like tiny little bit of an austere life. Actually, material life is a very austere life. But they engage in some kind of like, they wake up early, they take cold showers, and they live very simply. And people see it and they're like, wow, this is very spiritual. This is very, very high level, esoteric kind of stuff. And yeah, so they accept them as role models. They accept them as role models. They accept them as gurus. But what's the result? The result of accepting somebody like this as a guru is that Prabhupada mentions, he says, ultimately they just die in the struggle for existence. And there's a verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam in the 7th canto, I think. A very famous verse, Natevidu svartakating hi vishnum darashayaye bhahyartamaninaham anthayatandayar upaniyamanas te pisha tantram urudam nibadha. That when one is entrapped, or one who is entrapped in the consciousness of trying to enjoy material life, and who accepts, as a result of that, who accepts as their leader or as their guru a similarly blind man attached to material sense gratification, well, first of all, they can't know. They cannot know that the ultimate goal of life is to go back home, back to Godhead, and engage in the service of Lord Vishnu. But also, just like a blind man leading other blind men miss the right path and fall into a ditch, similarly, these people, they're bound by the ropes of fruitive labor, and they have to continue on again and again in materialistic life, suffering the threefold miseries. So people, they're suffering like anything, but they don't stop to think at all about it. In fact, they're fully convinced that they're very happy, and they make up some, stupid sayings like, you got to take the good with the bad, every cloud is a silver lining, just to justify their really pathetic lifestyle. So yeah, these people, they can't obtain the real goal of life. And so that's why it's stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Gurur nasasyat svajano nasasyat, Pita nasasyat janani nasasyat, Daivam natatsyan, what is it? Daivam natatsyan, napatishcha sasyan, namocha yed, yat samupetam ritim, right. That one should not become a guru, a father, a mother, a demigod, even a relative. Yeah, if they can't deliver their dependents from the cycle of birth and death. So this is the real qualification of a role model. And so that's why, as devotees, especially devotees of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, we accept His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada the foremost son, spiritual son of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, as our role model, because he's a real role model. Srila Prabhupada, he can actually deliver us from the cycle of birth and death. This is his qualification as a role model. Like Guru Kripa Prabhu mentioned, Srila Prabhupada, he's Acharya all the way. Guru Kripa Prabhu mentioned this when Prabhupada was leaving the world. He said, Prabhupada's Acharya all the way. And it's true. It's true. Acharya means one who teaches by his behavior. And Prabhupada, everything he did practically, you could say was like an instruction, because he was a Shaktivesh avatar. He was sent by Krishna personally to save us, to make us fortunate, to give us the goal of life, to instruct us on how to be perfect, in service to Guru and Krishna. And Prabhupada had that effect on people. Like no matter what he did, like for example, Pragosh Prabhu, I was hearing a memory from Pragosh Prabhu not long ago, where he was mentioning how he was on a morning walk with Prabhupada. And there was a lot of like big shikas there on that walk. So he was kind of in the back, so he was having a tough time hearing Prabhupada, so he was kind of weaving through the crowd, trying to get closer to Prabhupada so he can hear him. But then all of a sudden Prabhupada, because he did this often, he would stop and kind of make some comments on something he saw or something he was thinking about during the walk. But Pragosh Prabhu somehow got distracted, and Prabhupada stopped very abruptly, and he stepped on Prabhupada's heel. He kind of bumped into him. And so Prabhupada took his cane and he poked him in the chest. He said, "Don't get close." And so Pragosh was mentioning how for 20, for like 20, 30 years, and I'm sure probably still, but this simple instruction, "Don't get close," it was just, bouncing around in his mind, and he was thinking, all these different meanings, It meant, every time he thought about it, it meant something different, don't get too familiar with the spiritual master, don't be close in proximity, so many things. It can mean so many things. And so this was Prabhupada's effect on people, that everything he said, it sank into people's minds. And it reminded them of Krishna ultimately, and reminded them of how to engage properly in the process of devotional service. And like Prabhupada said, example is better than precept. And this is exactly how Prabhupada taught. He taught by his example. He was a perfect servant of his spiritual master. He's a perfect servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he was a perfect servant of the previous acharyas, a perfect servant of Shastra. Prabhupada is completely perfect in everything that he did. To him, there was no difference between, like for us, on the platform of sadhana bhakti. There's a difference between the philosophy, what we read in the Bhagavatam, and practical life. We have to remind ourselves, okay, I'm supposed to remember Krishna now. Okay, I have to focus on the holy name. Okay, this person's a spirit soul. They're not their bodies. I'm not my body. These are things we have to remember. We have to remind ourselves. But for Prabhupada, there was absolutely 100% no difference between the philosophy and life. It was he lived in Krishna consciousness. And I think it was Harishari Prabhu also in a memory, he said that Prabhupada was the Bhagavatam personified, because everything he did was just completely saturated with the teachings of the Bhagavatam, with the message of the Bhagavatam, the mood of Bhagavatam. So yes, Prabhupada, he saw Krishna in everything, and he saw everything in Krishna, and he wanted to engage everything in Krishna's service. And so this is an example for us. This is a role model. This is somebody that we should follow. We shouldn't imitate, but we should follow him. We should follow Prabhupada in dedicating our lives to Krishna and dedicating everything we do, our body, mind, and words to Krishna. Because otherwise, what are we doing here? What's the point? First of all, what are we doing in the material world? We're just taking up space. But also, what are we doing here? In Krishna consciousness, if we're not trying to get off the neophyte platform, if we're not trying to get off the platform of sadhana bhakti. So that's our business. Our business is to make ourselves perfect. And Prabhupada, there's a couple nice quotes. This is from a letter in 1972, Prabhupada says our business is to raise ourselves to the highest status of life as preachers of Krishna's message. And one should behave himself rigidly, and then he should instruct others. Two things: be himself exemplary, and then teach others to be exemplary. If one has not come to that high standard, he cannot judge or criticize others. There's one saying from the Bible, "Judge not, lest ye be judged." So how can we preach unless we are able to make judgments? That will not be possible. Only those who are above suspicion can judge others. So the goal of making ourselves perfect in Krishna consciousness, of engaging in the process of Krishna consciousness, what Prabhupada wanted us to do is he wanted to make ourselves perfect so that we would have the strength to go out and help make other people perfect. And that's the perfection in Krishna consciousness. Like Prabhupada said, there's Bhajananandis and there's Goshtyanandis. Bhajananandi is one who is focused wholly and solely on chanting the holy name, residing in one place, living very austerely like a Babaji. But then there's Goshtyanandis who take pleasure in, or who primarily engage in the service of going out and meeting people and telling them about Krishna. But Prabhupada said that the ideal is a Bhajananandi who likes to preach. So a mix of the two. So we should make ourselves perfect. We should be really, really serious about making advancement in Krishna consciousness. This should be like our life and soul. And then using that perfection, that advancement that we make, we should go out and we should give it to others. Vaisheshika Guru says that our preaching should be an overflow of our ecstasy in Krishna consciousness. And this was the goal of Prabhupada's movement. Prabhupada wanted to create a Brahminical movement. He wanted to create a movement of people who would make themselves perfect, strictly follow the rules and regulations, rising early, chanting 16 rounds, no meat, no illicit sex, no intoxication, no gambling, no prajalpa, speaking about Krishna always. And he wanted us to take that and to lead society. Because right now, society, this society now in Kali Yuga, it's like a society without a head. The Brahmanas are described as the head of society because that's where the brains are. Everybody goes to them for instruction. What should I do? Excuse me, but primarily the Kshatriyas, the leaders of society, they go to the Brahmanas. I guess not the leaders of society, but the administrators of society, the ones who are actually enforcing law, the ones who are actually enacting authority. They go to the Brahmanas for advice, for guidance. How should I do this? How should I do that? Because the Brahmanas, they know how things should be done because they know the purpose of life. The idea is that we should do everything in order to attain the purpose of life, which is to serve Krishna, to serve the spiritual master, and eventually go back home, back to God, and be reinstated in our position as a eternal servant of Krishna in a particular mood. And so this is the function of Brahmanas. So everybody in the Krishna consciousness movement should become a Brahmana, in the sense that they should. Of course, there's distinctions. Not everybody is a Brahmana by nature, but we should become Brahmanas in the sense that we should preach. We should go out and we should help people. Because these people, they're suffering like anything. They have no idea. They have no idea what they're doing. Even if they may seem very intelligent, they may seem like they have it all together. They may have a big house. They may have a wife. They may have a nice family and a dog or whatever. And they may seem very happy and very fixed up, but actually they're suffering like anything. They're actually not happy at all. Because it's a pathetic condition. Just like we see a hog on the street, and you don't see him here, but Prabhupada gives the example, like in Vrindavan, you see hogs on the street and they're eating stool. But they're very happy with their stool eating. But human beings who have some intelligence, we see that that's a pathetic condition. That's just a really sad position, that your pleasure is in eating stool off the street. And so similarly, the devotees of the Lord, we see people engaged in material sense gratification, and we think, what are you doing? What are you doing with your life? You're just eating stool, just different variations, wet stool, dry stool, Prabhupada says. And so we feel really sorry for them. And we feel some urgency, some compassionate anxiety to help them and to get them out of that pathetic condition and raise them to the platform of Krishna consciousness, Shuddha Sattva. And so for this we have to be really serious about making spiritual advancement. And we make spiritual advancement, Prabhupada says the secret to making spiritual advancement is the satisfaction of the spiritual master. And just by trying to please Prabhupada in whatever service we're doing, Prabhupada says, just by trying to please me, you are pleasing me. So we just have to have that intent, that endeavor to please Srila Prabhupada. And then that will make our life perfect. Yasya prasadad bhagavat prasado, yasya prasadad nagati kutopi. And if we don't please Srila Prabhupada, then there's no hope for us. We have no hope of making any spiritual advancement. And Prabhupada is extremely merciful. Just like this thing of just try to please me, and you will be pleasing me. I mean, that's not very hard. It's not very hard to develop a desire to please Srila Prabhupada. I mean, he's not really asking for much from us. Like Rajendra Nandan Prabhu used to give this example of a personal experience he had with Srila Prabhupada, where he was in Dallas and he offered his obeisances to Prabhupada. And all he did is he didn't let his bead bag touch the ground. He showed some attention, like held it above his head like that. He showed some attention in trying to follow, be sattvic and ultimately follow what Srila Prabhupada told him. And Prabhupada gave him a nice jai. And he was pleased with that. He was pleased just with that little thing, that little attention to detail. Prabhupada was so pleased. And so he's making it so easy for us. Prabhupada's making it so easy for us. So we don't have to go anywhere else. What else are we looking for? There's so many people, they say, oh, Prabhupada, he just gave us the basics, but we really have to go to these higher topics, and we have to go to some Rasika Vaishnav, and Prabhupada is a Rasika Vaishnav, by the way. But we have to go to someone who's constantly speaking about rasa, and then we'll get the real taste of Krishna consciousness. But they're completely bogus, this whole thing. And Prabhupada gave us absolutely everything because he gave us the holy name of Krishna. And so if we just take shelter of Srila Prabhupada's instructions as our life and soul, then we'll attain all success. And I'd like to just finish by reading from this book, Jai Srila Prabhupada by His Holiness Bhakti Vikas Swami Maharaj. There's a nice little short, just a paragraph or so. It's a section called Turning to Srila Prabhupada. Whatever problems or difficulties we have, when we remember Srila Prabhupada, our anxieties dissipate. Nothing that the material energy can throw at us is all that bad if we simply remember that Prabhupada is always with us and caring for us. By remembering our eternal relationship with him, we realize that everything is all right. Problems will come and go, but Srila Prabhupada's lotus feet remain as our eternal shelter. As Srila Prabhupada said, this material world is full of problems, but when you go back to Godhead, there are no more problems. And there's this ecstatic picture of Srila Prabhupada. But yes, so we have to stick close to Prabhupada. We have to just hold on to his lotus feet for dear life, and then he'll take us back to Godhead. And he's here, he's present in his books, he's present in his murti, he's present everywhere. If we have the eyes to see, Prabhupada is always instructing us. So that's what I have. So maybe we can have questions, comments.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Vijay Krishna. Maybe Dravida Prabhu has something.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Amogha. A bracing class. like this whole part of the Bhagavatam.
Yeah.
Just if I might point out the context of that verse you quoted, by Prahlad Maharaj.
Yeah.
The three verses actually go together.
Mm.
The one before it, he's telling his father, you'll never become Krishna conscious. Matirna Krishna Padadaksatova. Because you've taken a vow to enjoy family life. Yeah. And your senses are therefore out of control. And you're being covered by ignorance and chewing the chewed, like that. So then the day in Nate Badu, he's describing these people.
Yeah.
Because that tells all this, more or less true. Mm. But then he gives a solution to bathe yourself in the dust of the pure devotee.
Yeah.
Which is the last thing Aranyakashipu is going to do.
Yeah.
But that's really a good lesson for all of us, because that's kind of the default. And Prabhupada is describing here, but Jad Bharat is describing, this is what material life is like. This is what's going on. So, but the way out of it is to, as you so nicely put it, we said personally we have surrendered to Srila Prabhupada, but to come in touch with a pure devotee representative of the Lord who can wake us up and who can change our whole orientation of life and help us back to God. But I just wanted to point out the context of it.
Yeah, Jai, thank you. Raj.
I got a question regarding your comment that we shouldn't get too familiar with our spiritual leader. That's what you mentioned. In the American world, they call it idol worship, but they worship politicians, sports, and all those things. Yeah. So they blind themselves to what these people really are, and they build a false idea so they don't see their negativity. Yeah. Is that comment regarding that if we make idol worship almost of their spiritual leader because of our too familiarized, we forget what the wisdom and the insight that essence brought, and simply just fall in love with the person and the actions that they're doing, so we don't see the real aspect of it?
It's more just that, like, there's this idea that familiarity breeds contempt. Like, for example, you could have like a really good friend, but then like as soon as you move in together, you know, you're around together all the time, you start like kind of like just like being irked by them, you know. But that's also there, you know. That's also there that we shouldn't just we shouldn't necessarily just love Prabhupada because he's like nice, or, you know, he's just like a nice person, or he like makes us feel good. But the real like value, the real substance of Srila Prabhupada and of any spiritual master is their instructions and their ability to represent the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's there also. Yeah. Dimitri Prabhu.
Yeah, thank you for a nice class. Could you please describe a little bit more what Shaktivesh avatar means, and where does it mention that Srila Prabhupada is that Shaktivesh avatar?
So a Shaktivesh avatar is not directly Krishna, but he's empowered by Krishna to spread the Sankirtan movement. I'm forgetting the verse, but I know where it is. The one that Sridhar Maharaj, yeah. Yeah, Krishna, yeah. Maybe you can give Dravida Prabhupada.
And then Vijay's not here. Basically says the Dharma of the age is Sankirtan, everyone can be delivered by it. But Krishna Shakti Vina Nahitar Pravatan, without being empowered by Krishna, Shakti Vina means without, Krishna Shakti Vina Nahitar Pravatan, one cannot spread the chanting of the holy name. Prabhupada obviously spread it all over the world, therefore he must be empowered, therefore he must be Shakti based.
Yeah, I have the verse here. Antya 7:11. Kali Kala Krishna Dharma Krishna Nama Sankirtan Krishna Shakti Bina Nahe Tar Pravartan. The fundamental religious system in the age of Kali is the chanting of the holy name of Krishna. Unless empowered by Krishna, one cannot propagate the Sankirtan movement. So, a Shaktivesh avatar is one who is empowered with Krishna Shakti. So I mentioned in this verse, Krishna Shakti Bina Nahe Tar Pravartan. So, Srila Prabhupada, due to his spreading the Sankirtan movement all over the world, we can see that he actually does have Krishna Shakti. So that makes him a Shaktivesh avatar. So you said, what is a Shaktivesh avatar? What makes Srila Prabhupada a Shaktivesh avatar? Did you have another question?
Yeah, and where was it mentioned?
Okay, so that's, here.
And and the God brothers of Srila Prabhupada couldn't spread the holy name throughout the world, so you can't consider them that.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else in-house? Okay, Vijay Krishna Prabhu.
Yes, Amogha Prabhu, Dandavat Pranams. My question is, thank you very much. You're very kind. My question is, why does one need to renounce and accept Shastra to become a devotee?
Well, I'm not sure how else you'd do it. Why do you have to renounce and accept Shastra? Yeah. Well, Shastra give the instructions on how to be a devotee. So you could, so there's two sides to becoming a devotee. One is the negative aspect, meaning you have to give up sense gratification. You have to give up Maya, because if you don't give up Maya, the nature of Maya, she has this covering potency and this throwing potency. So first you're covered, and then you're thrown, meaning you're thrown down into the depths of material existence. Very, very, and you become totally bewildered and completely far away from any kind of spiritual knowledge. You literally cannot know. If you're absorbed in material sense gratification, you cannot know the real goal of life, svartakati. So one has to give up Maya in order to come to the neutral platform. And one can do this just on the basis of their mental speculation. One can attain, you could say, impersonal liberation, this neutral state of I'm not suffering, just through mental speculation. But if one actually wants to become a devotee of Krishna, a bhakta, then one needs, absolutely 100% needs Shastra and the pure devotees who propagate Shastra in order to have this kind of realization, because they give the instructions, they give information about Krishna, which you can't know otherwise. They give information about the spiritual world, which you can't know otherwise. And so like this, and they also give instructions about the process of sadhana bhakti and how to practice and eventually attain the pure state of Krishna consciousness, of prema bhakti. So without these things, it's like trying to build a skyscraper without any plans. You have the materials are there, the potential for the skyscraper is there, but how in the world are you ever going to figure out how to put them together without any kind of instructions? So Shastra is extremely important. It's actually there's nothing more important than Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra.
So that is your answer?
That is my answer.
Oh, Prabhu, if I may, your answer reminded me one of the main books we have, Nectar of Instruction by Srila Rupa Goswami. Outstanding answer to my question. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Dhanvari Mata.
Thank you. Very nice class, Prabhu. I have a quick question. When you mentioned that about judgmental, not judging, we cannot judge. Would you talk about in like practical life, or what? How do we?
Yeah. Well, yeah, Prabhupada was just mentioning this quote from the Bible, judge not lest ye be judged. So Prabhupada says, how can we preach unless we are able to make judgments? That will not be possible. So we have to make judgments. We have to discriminate who is a devotee, who is not a devotee. Because otherwise, how are we supposed to lift people up to the platform of being a devotee if we see them as a devotee? This is why the souls who are Uttama Adhikaris, they have to, in order to preach, they have to step down to the Madhyam Adhikari, to Madhyam Adhikar, on the platform where they see this is a devotee, this is somebody who's in material consciousness, who's suffering in the material world, and this is a devotee who is engaged in the service of Krishna. And so, unless one makes these distinctions, there's no way that one can even find a non-devotee what to speak of, preach to them and try to lift them up.
Thank you, Prabhu. So in real life, the other judgmental, like people don't like if more judging based on whatever they're.
Yeah, I mean, we shouldn't judge people based on some kind of bodily thing, like somebody, like it's not like somebody walks by and they're of a certain skin color, so I'm not going to preach to them. But then somebody walks by and they're of a, you know, different skin color, and it's okay, you know, these people are good, so we should preach to them. It's not like that. We should be, you know, we try to help everybody, because there's no, this is all just external. It's like if somebody's wearing a different T-shirt, I'm not going to preach to them. So, you know, but this person, if they're wearing a red T-shirt, then I'll preach to them. So we shouldn't discriminate who we try to help based on some kind of bodily consideration.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
One little comment. Then
Yes.
Srila Prabhupada would often quote this verse, Nam dushkada no murdhapa bhajade naradama, because he would say, you know, if someone who's not a devotee of Krishna is a fool, is a rascal like that. I'm not saying. This is Krishna saying.
Yeah.
So that's how we make judgments. But I think the point, and one of the thrust of your class, was that we have to be in a position where the same judgment is going to. In other words, we have to be following very, very, very closely.
Yeah.
So that our judgment has potency. Just like Prabhupada's words had such potency because he was just on a pure level, a realized level.
Yeah.
And he was just speaking Shastra. So if we want to be representatives of the Guru and Shastra, then we have to follow carefully. So therefore, you have to be austere and you have to give up.
Yeah. Prabhupada, he mentioned that he wanted us to become acharyas. Acharya means one who teaches by behavior. So he wanted us to become, he wanted us to know Shastra, to know Scripture. He wanted us to know the instructions of the previous acharyas and follow them very strictly so that we could.
Achar and prachar go together.
Yeah, achar and prachar.
But that's why we use the name preaching. Prachar, it's in Bengal.
Yeah. Okay. Any last questions or comments? Okay. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.